Hello everyone. Welcome to another lesson in Science 2, where we will know more about the hereditary material which is present in human beings and most other living organisms called DNA or deoxyribonucleic acid. Who discovered DNA? DNA was discovered by the Swiss biologist Miescher in 1869 when he was doing research on white blood cells. The double helix structure of DNA was later discovered by James Watson and Francis Crick. And it was also proved that DNA is responsible for storing genetic information in living organisms. In eukaryotes, DNA is found inside the nucleus. Eukaryotes or cells or organisms that have clearly defined nucleus. There is a membrane around the nucleus, separate cell organelles within the cell. So human beings are eukaryotes and the DNA is found inside the nucleus of each cell. Now, as the cell is very small and organisms have many DNA molecules. A DNA molecule is a very long structure, okay, and cannot fit into such a small cell having a smaller nucleus. Therefore, this DNA molecule must be tightly packed to fit within the small nucleus of the cell. Now, this tightly packed form of DNA is called a chromosome. If you look at the picture, you will find the nucleus of the cell. Within the nucleus, you have a chromosome, and if you unravel this chromosome, you will find it is so big with the DNA structure. Now, this is the nucleus of a cell, and within you see the purple colored chromosomes. You magnify a chromosome and you will find that when you unravel it, it is so big. It comes right up to the end here. Now, if I take this end and keep turning it and putting it together like how you put thread on a reel, finally it becomes into a structure of a chromosome which goes back into the nucleus and stored within the nucleus of a cell. DNA are molecules responsible for carrying and transmitting hereditary materials or characteristics from parents to offsprings. Very important. This is the acid, deoxyribonucleic acid, which is responsible for how I look, talk, walk, behave, etc. When DNA is present in the nucleus of the cell, it is called nuclear DNA, and the complete cell set of all nuclear DNA in any organism is called its genome. So the genome of the human being is in this picture here. If you can see right from the top of your head to right to the bottom of your body structure, there is DNA, and that entire complete set of DNA within the nucleus of any cell is called the genome of a person. Human genome contains about 3 billion bases, about 20,000 genes on 23 pairs of chromosomes. In this picture, you can see nuclear DNA. Apart from that, you see that there is some amount of DNA in the mitochondria too. So human beings and some organisms have nuclear DNA present in nucleus. They also have mitochondrial DNA, and plants have chloroplast DNA. Mitochondria, very important cell organelle because it's responsible for all the energy that we have in our body. Therefore, it is also called the powerhouse of the cell. And if you look within the picture, you will be able to see those ring-like structures called mitochondrial DNA. If you see the picture here, you will see a female and a male called the parents. Most cells contain 46 chromosomes, that are 23 pairs. So we have the male having 46 chromosomes or 23 pairs, and the female having 46 chromosomes or 23 pairs. During sexual reproduction, the organism or the child or the progeny inherits half of the nuclear DNA, not mitochondrial DNA, half the nuclear DNA from the male parent and half the nuclear DNA from the female parent. So, male has the gamete called sperm, female has a reproductive gamete called the egg, each having only half, that is 23 and 23 chromosomes. Now, after the process of fertilization, when both the sperm and the egg get together, a zygote is formed. Now, 23 plus 23, the zygote has 46 chromosomes, which further leads to the offspring or the progeny or the baby, which contains 46 chromosomes or 23 pairs. But these organisms or the newborn inherit all mitochondrial DNA only from their female parent. This occurs because only egg cells of the female and not sperm cells of the male keep their mitochondria during fertilization. This is the figure of a sperm. You can see that the mitochondria is in this portion, which is not inherited by the offspring. What is DNA, which is so important, made up of? It is made up of building blocks called nucleotides. Now in Lego, we put one block over the other and we build something. So DNA is made of similar building blocks which are called nucleotides. They consist of three parts: phosphate group, sugar group, and one of four types of nitrogen bases. So the building block of the DNA is called a nucleotide. Each nucleotide consists of three parts, that's a phosphate group, a sugar group, and nitrogen bases, which are of four types. Now, to form one strand of DNA, these nucleotides are linked into chains with the phosphate and the sugar group. If you can see here, the nucleotides, the sugar phosphate backbone, the sides of it like little strips of ribbon are the sugar and phosphate groups, whereas the nitrogenous bases is this G and C, adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. So three of them together, the sugar phosphate group and the nitrogenous bases, form a strand of DNA. Four types of nitrogenous bases found in the nucleotides are adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. Okay. So if you look at the figure, these are the structural formulas of each one: cytosine or C, thymine or T in DNA, adenine or A, and guanine G. Now cytosine and thymine always pair together, called pyrimidines, and adenine and guanine or A and G or G and A always pair together. They are called purines. Now the order or sequence of how these bases are there in DNA, okay, this determines what are the hereditary characteristics contained in that DNA. So when the new baby is born, according to those sequences of this cytosine, thymine, etc., they will have some kind of hereditary characteristics. For example, one sequence may say, okay, the child will have curly hair. Another will say, okay, it might instruct for straight hair. Similarly, the color of eyes, color of skin, the height and, whatever bone structure, whatever is determined by these pyrimidines and purines, the sequence of how it is placed in DNA. So if we unravel this double helix structure and put it together like this, you will find it looks just like a ladder. And if you can clearly see A and T, that is adenine and thymine together, or it could be T and A, okay, that is the sequencing or the coding, and G and C, that is guanine and cytosine, always together. And these are the structural formula, and this structure which is rolling around over here is the structure of the DNA. Now, what does DNA do? DNA contains instructions needed for any organism not only to reproduce, not only to give the characteristics to the next generation, but DNA also contains the instructions needed for me and you to develop, to grow, and to survive. So DNA is not only all about reproduction. We need that DNA to grow in a particular manner and to survive also. Now, to carry out the functions, DNA sequences cannot remain like, okay, A and T, C and G. They have to be converted into messages. And these messages, will determine how we act, how we grow, what kind of reproduction, etc. Okay. Now, these messages can be used to produce proteins, and these proteins are the most complex, difficult to understand molecules that do all the work in our body. So, DNA sequences have to be changed to messages. These messages are used to produce proteins which do all the work in our body. And finally, each DNA sequence that contains instructions to make a protein is known as a gene. So when you pull out the whole DNA structure, you get a sequence of it, a set like this in the picture, and that is called a gene. And these contain instructions to make a particular protein. And these read through and find out fun facts, amazing facts about DNA.